What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Marsh Talk. Today we have a really cool guest, the GOAT of kayak fishing. That's what I call him. That's what a lot of other people call him. This dude is a book of knowledge. Uh, he knows a lot, and hopefully you're going to learn a little bit something today from him. We got Steve Lessard. What's going on, man?
Hey, Josh, nice to be here with you. I'm glad I could contribute, and hopefully we can get some knowledge out there to the folks that everyone can pick up some tips and things, and we'll let you know a few secrets that help me be successful, but the real secret is they can make you successful too.
All right. I'm looking forward to this. I might need a notepad and a pen. Well, before we get started, let everybody know who you are, a little bit about yourself, things like that.
My name is Steve Lessard. I'm Louisiana native. Grew up in Ascension Parish, Baton Rouge, and had a variety of fishing experiences throughout my life. Really, from the time I can remember, from walking, my first memories were fishing in a little pond behind my house. I found little bayous, ditches. I found anything I could fish in when I was small. I loved it. And as time went on, I really got into fishing in the backyard. What does that mean? When it was birthday time or Christmas time, I would ask for a new reel. I would ask for a fishing rod. And I would cast in the yard at 10, 11 years old. And I learned how to cast left-handed, even though I was right-handed, and right-handed. And we can get more into that later, but those are the kind of background things that I thought about when I was young. Now, fishing wasn't my whole life, but it was a good way to. It was my video game. We didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have expensive video games. I never had all the games and things that other people had, but I would go fishing. I did the same thing in the winter. I would go hunting. I would started hunting with a pellet gun. I would hunt with 410, 22, just moved all the way up, you know. And a lot of those times, you learned some of the basics. Okay, a cold front's coming in. What's going to happen with the wildlife? You know, it's foggy. What are they going to do? It's hot. What's going on? But those are some of my childhood experiences. And as an adult, I started fishing a few bass events. And then I got into offshore fishing. And I spent probably 10 years fishing offshore a lot. I would go 30 times a year, a lot of different trips, trolling, bottom fishing, tuna popping, all kind, just a lot of stuff out in the Gulf. Loved it, had a great time doing the offshore thing. And one day I decided, kind of had enough of this. It's really rough on the body. And I wanted to do something simple. I wanted to go kind of back to my roots. And that is, that's where picking up the idea of a kayak kind of brought me back to when I was a boy. I'd jump in the little pirogue. And it was appealing to me from that aspect. And at first it was going to be a laid back, just paddle around, simple experience. And it turned into what, us, and I'm not going to say guys, I'm going to say people, because there's men, there's women who are very, very competitive in things, and that comes out. And that's what happened with the tournament scene, is that competitiveness comes out with a lot of people, and that's what happened to me. So I had everything hitting at one time. I wanted to do something simpler. I wanted to compete, and that's where it all started.
Man, yeah, I can definitely relate to the competitive side coming out when you originally had the idea it's just going to be something simple and relaxing and a way to get out and enjoy the marsh or a lake or a pond. Yeah, I can relate with that. So you started out and you started getting into the kayak thing. Kind of
Yeah.
expand on how that grew into the tournament scene.
Yeah. So in 2009 or so, somewhere up in there, 2008, 2009, I was really starting to suffer with my back from work. I worked in the HVAC industry a lot through most of my working career, and I had a couple of herniated discs, and it bothered me. When I would work out a lot, walk a lot, it would get better. So I said, I want to strengthen my core. I want to do these things. So really, what I was doing was lying to myself to try to get to go fishing. So, but I did use the kayaking as therapy. I would get out and paddle and try to strengthen my core. Well, you know, that a couple of shows I listened to Don Dubuque. I heard Brendan on there, and I was just fired up about it. One of my good friends, one of the ambassadors of the sport, Brendan Bayard's just he's the man in this area. It really helped start Bayou Coast, and has just been a wealth of knowledge. Well, when I first came on the scene, I decided, well, this Bayou Coast Club has an event. I think I'm going to join. I think I'm going to do that. You know, I'm thinking, I know how to fish. I don't know how to kayak, but I know how to fish. So I go out there on the first Minimalist Challenge in 2010, and I absolutely stunk. I caught nothing. I skunked. It was a terrible weather day. And, I got back, and Brendan won the tournament. And I said, man, I've got to figure out, what is he doing? What am I doing? What is going on here? And I spent that year, 2010, trying to understand how to move on the water, what to do. And things started to fall into place. I got like a 5th place finish in a redfish tournament. And towards the end of the year, I got a 2nd place finish at the Where You At tournament, the last tournament of the year. And I said, well, okay, I'm starting to figure this thing out. Things are progressing along. One day maybe I can win one of these, and that was my goal. Mm-hmm. So, it kind of in the off season, I kind of worked on some stuff, and went back to, okay, lure selection, and then let's put it all together. Where do I want to fish? What type of conditions am I looking for? And all of this. So that is how I got into it, was that desire to do better, improve, and from where I was then until where I went just a few years later was night and day, just because of I was starting to pull it all together. And that's what we can share with everyone and give them some of those ideas of if they're struggling in an area, maybe this will help.
Yeah. I mean, you've definitely found a tremendous amount of success in the kayak tournament scene. At what point do you think you really started to figure out what you owe all that success to?
In 2011, I was still confused because I won the first tournament. So, and what happened on the first Minimalist, we all went out to the sulfur mine. This is back in the day. And I was paddling. So a lot of people were well ahead of me in the Hobies. Mm-hmm. And so I'd get out, and I kind of knew we had a north wind. So I wanted to go north and get on the lee shore and start there. Mm-hmm. And I was going to look for some transition banks where we had some deep and shallow water, things like the basics. Yeah. I'm going to look for the basics. Well, I started moving down a bank, and there was a little tiny island next to a more major slough. And everyone else was, some people were throwing the top water with the lure under it, but I didn't realize that I was in the kayak, and I said, I'm going to tie the lure underneath the top water and suspend it over these oysters. I found oysters, and I hung one of my baits up. And that's devastating in the minimalist. If you don't know what the minimalist is, Bayou Coast started an event where you get 5 plastics and a couple of jig heads, and that's it. And a top water was back then. We did that for several years. So here's your bag of baits. Good luck. So we go out, and I said, I'm gonna take my top water, and I'm gonna suspend my bait. The rules don't say I can't, so I saw some other guys doing it. Hey, is that okay? Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna do that. So I tied my lure underneath, and I decided, well, what I'm gonna do is try to find a bite, and then I'm gonna try to expand on it. Well, I catch a trout, and off this little bitty island, and that was pretty nice. I said, man, I got a fish. I'm gonna at least get some kind of a score. So I kept moving around, and then I kept having hits, and kept missing them and whatever. And I said, all right, well, let me take it off. And let me use the other rod I have with the other jig. Let me go to the bottom. So I went down, and there was a stack of redfish below these trout. I caught 5 redfish in probably 10 casts. And but this guy helped me find a clue. And when I found that clue, then I worked the water column. So there's a couple principles, and that's like principle number 1. Work the water column. So if you're in an area, too many people are going to throw just this or just this, top water or jig, but nothing in between. But those fish were suspended just right with a very long leader. My leader was really long. It was very hard to throw, but I knew the depth of the water, and I was trying to get somewhere in between with that long leader, and that's when I got that bite with that trout. Standard popping cork, 2 foot under, wouldn't have got the bite. There were other people trying with the top water, weren't getting the bites. Mine was 3.5 foot, long. But that was a lesson in work the water column. So I proceeded to fish for the trout, slightly over, back with the top water. Caught my trout. I caught a full bag, 25 trout. Whew. And one was 4 pounds.
Wow.
So we go back in, and I'm paddling. And the boat was so heavy, I was struggling to get back in on time. So I realized my fitness was not where it needed to be.
That's big in kayak.
Yes, it is. So after I won that event, I went on to get a Hobie. I found a used one, and that was the Lucky 11. That kayak, I went on to win the rest of the tournaments that year. I won all 5 Bayou Coast tournaments. Some of them were very, very close. We had some very skilled anglers. We had some guys who were redfish specialists, even back then. We had some guys who were trout specialists who had honey holes. But things would always happen where I would make a decision, and a lot of times I didn't know why, and that's the part where I'm saying I was confused still. So it really took a couple of years to kind of look back on that and say, what happened during these times? What did I do? But that was a magical year, and one of the biggest things was I kept remembering my principles. Fish the water column. Am I gonna fish fast? Am I gonna fish slow? Am I going to stay on a spot for a while and what I call love that spot? or am I going to hate it and never go back to it?
Yeah.
And those principles kind of tie in also to known behaviors. Like, for example, when you're going to make a decision back then, I made decisions based on, is it old wives' tales? I think it's based in science, fact, and experience.
Mm-hmm.
When we have a full moon, I felt like we have a 30 minutes in the morning or a quick morning bite, and we have another bite in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do in the meantime? In the meantime, we need to fish slow, super slow, or super fast and get a reaction bite.
Mm-hmm.
There's no two ways about it. You go fast, you go slow, and try to generate something.
Yeah.
And it's typically going to be on the bottom on a full moon bite. But once that afternoon bite comes around, you really want to be in the position that you feel like you're going to have a window, 45 minutes, an hour, where that bite turns back on. You want to make it count, because in a tournament situation, they may end at 3.
Yeah.
They may end at 2. You got to get it done and get in. And those are some of the things that I was doing during the year, and I didn't really realize it until after I kind of reflected back on it. It's like, yeah, that's the way to do that.
Man, an entire tournament trail in a year, you won every tournament. That's crazy. How many tournaments do you think you've won altogether?
35, 40, I'm not sure.
Wow.
I know I won 6 IFAs and 2 Worlds, and I won a lot of Bayou Coast, a lot of Lafayette Club tournaments, some bass tournaments. I won the Swamp Country Toledo Bend Bass Tournament. A couple, a variety of different ones, some charity tournaments and things like that. But I won a bass. Clayton and I won a bass tournament on False River. Mm-hmm. So it was like a Coca-Cola invitational. So it was a fun event. So we went in there and we did pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 things I kind of was thinking about touching on there and that, but I'll go first. Do you have a favorite tournament you won, one that kind of stands out the most?
Oh, favorite tournament. Yeah, well, I feel like some tournaments are special in their own way. Wow. I mean, I would have to say 2014 Worlds was probably my biggest big win.
Yeah.
I was in Europe fishing for pike and perch against the Europeans. They had 2 anglers that this was their home lake. One of them was a guide. So, I felt like that was probably one of my favorites. I really had a good time we fished an IFA event in Texas, and we went down to Rockport. And what was special about that one is, at the time, IFA had regionals. So we had the East Coast Regional, Florida East and West, the Gulf South, a Louisiana Division, Texas Division. So all these guys who were competing for their Angler of the Year were there, the top 2, 3 guys from all these divisions. And like Louisiana, we had a pretty good-sized crew. Mm-hmm. Texas had a huge crew. We had probably 70 anglers in that event, 75. Pretty good-sized event for an IFA.
Yeah.
The thing about an IFA was participation wasn't always huge, because there was a format issue that some people didn't like catching a bull red. We released them, and we're going to get into that. Mm-hmm. Some people, there was an intimidation factor, I felt like, as well, when you had people, Brendan Bayard and Benton Parrott, and you just had hammers showing up.
Titans of the kayak.
Titans showing up, and you see them holding the trophies every event, and some people just were reluctant to put their money into an
Yeah.
event like that. I kind of felt like that was some of it. But I had started, and they weren't going to let me just walk away from it. So we went to Rockport, and I had a day. I had a day and a half or a day and a few hours to practice. So in practice, fished all around, went miles and miles, all kind of directions, and I found some trout that were in the like 22-inch range, 21, 22-inch range in a spot that was a couple miles away. And I had found some redfish on a flat about a mile past that. And a little bit of current. It was a big moon that weekend, I believe, and it was just a long way, And I said, well, we got to get there and go. So as soon as it was blast off time, we start going. And I knew where I was going. And there was this little bayou to cut through from one bay to another to get over to that side. And here comes the Texas flats boats. And they're those redfish boats that ride in 6 inches of water. And they're just coming right to me. And I'm going to the bayou, but I'm trying to get to one side. And they're just going around. They're going between me and the bank, which I was very close to the bank, here at that door. They're just blasting through. The waves are kicking up. I said, man, I've got to get out of here. This is dangerous. So I pull way over to the side, and I said, well, let me let this calm down and see if any more go through. And I ended up on a flat going the opposite direction. And this is where, I really, sometimes when things like this happen, you say, well, why did that happen? I almost felt like I was led to that spot.
Yeah.
Because I get over there, and I was just trying to get out of the way, and it was a cove. I get in this cove, and it was calm in there, and I could see this pod of bait fish way in the back, and it was like a zipper through the bait fish. And I said that was either a shark or a big trout, because it was fast and the water's shallow. So I said, all right. So I pushed myself up there, made a long cast with my top water right through those, and it was a good cast. I was happy with it. I start working my top water, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna screw this up. I'm gonna screw it up. So to prevent, this is the decision on the water that you make, and these are the decisions that are the difference between winning something and not. I said, I'm not going to look at it. I turned my head. Click, 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 click. With my head turned. Boom! And I heard it, and I did not react until I felt it. And when I felt it, I set the hook. 25.5-inch trout. And we're 10 minutes into the tournament. I said, well, I don't have to go way over there.
Couple miles off.
I said, let me look for a grass flat over here. Caught a nice red, and I'm winning the tournament. But luck is a big part of it, but at the same time, putting yourself in a position to have better luck.
Yeah.
To maybe it will happen, and if it does, I want to be there to capitalize on it. And those are the kind of decisions that you try to make when you're on the water.
Yeah, sometimes just having those instinctive decisions, really put you in a good position.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, you have found success in all across the world, different types of fisheries, freshwater, saltwater. Why do you think you've been able to find that kind of success no matter what fishery you're in? Is it your approach maybe?
Yeah, I feel like if I go out and I'm talking to a group of people or anything, I feel you may have some insecurities about yourself. How's my look? Do I have something on my face? Am I speaking right? You have insecurities in life, but as soon as I get on the water, I don't have that feeling anymore, and I just feel confident that my next cast may be it. And if I'm not, I'm going to move to the next spot where I have that chance. And even if it's a bad spot, I'm going to blast through it, but I'm going to say maybe. And that confidence helps me not, okay, and what does it do? And this is another principle for everyone to understand, that I am not one of the best fishermen. I'm applying principles that you can apply, and your skills can bring you to success. It will. What happens is I'm moving along and I'm making decisions, and I'm very intense on the water, but mentally relaxed, and having confidence about what I'm doing helps you for an 8-hour day. Let's say it's an 8-hour tournament, or you're gonna go have fun fish for 8 hours. If you have that feeling that nothing's happening, and you're just kind of hem-hawing around and kind of giving up after a few hours, well, you've only fished 2 hours, and my bite may not happen until 6 hours into the deal. So maintaining the confidence is one of the principles. Maintaining the I can do this until the 8th hour. That is important to me. Is never giving up.
Yeah. We've touched on some of these already, but do you have like a list of tips or advice that you would give anglers that are trying to find success like you do?
Yeah. So some of the things that I focus on before a trip is my preparation. You can want to be successful, and you can want to prepare, but actually preparing is two different things. And when I say prepare, I mean this. Let's put the principles together. What is the weather going to be? So let's determine. That's usually where I start. Let's say we're coming up on a new moon weekend. New moon weekend. Say it's April. Well, that tells me that is my best weekend for a big trout. Best weekend. So what am I going to do? I'm going to prepare to maybe upsize my bait. Maybe I'm going to throw more topwater, the larger topwater. Maybe I'm going to throw a swim bait in anticipation of trying to catch a big trout. And another thing that I'm going to do is look at. So that's what's our weather? What's our wind? What's the best situation I can put myself in? Now, what tackle am I bringing? What type of baits? If it's a full moon, oversized plastics, really large baits may not be the thing for that middle of the day when the bite is tough. What if I bring a itty bitty plastic? Let's bring some of those. It's a new moon. The big trout are probably going to be roaming on the high tide. Let's bring the big baits. Let's try to get a big bite. The jerk baits, I say big baits. Let's throw a 5-inch jerk bait instead of a little bitty. The little mirrodines are great, but sometimes the bigger baits can get that big bite.
Yeah.
Let's bring them and let's mentally prepare. And I think that's part of it too. Will they hit the small baits? Maybe. But let's mentally prepare for, I'm going to try for that big one because I know the situation's right.
Mm-hmm.
So preparedness also goes to, how am I going to rig my tackle? And I spend hours rigging my tackle before events. When somebody shows up and they're rigging all their tackle on the back of the truck, putting, all their maybe new line, everything, that's fine. That may work for them. For me, it doesn't, because I'm thinking about the day while I'm rigging my tackle. Okay, I am going to fish with a Miradyne. What is the best braid in the particular situation I feel like I'm going to be in? Do I want a heavier braid so that maybe I have more water resistance and I keep it up? Because there's a bar I want to fish that's a foot deep, and I want that braid to float. I want a shorter leader of mono that floats to keep that thing above those oysters. Mono versus fluoro. When to use it, when not, as a leader. When do you use straight braid? When do you use straight fluorocarbon? So those are all the things that I work on in that preparation going out.
Mm-hmm.
So I can elaborate on some of that equipment just real quick. General rule of thumb, red fishing. If you're going to red fish and sight fish, sure, straight braid typically works great. However, there are times that I feel like, now there's other guys who are really better sight fishermen than me than I can ever imagine to be.
Mm-hmm.
I am a terrible sight fisherman. I've missed more fish than I can count. I've lost more tournaments trying to sight fish them than I can count.
Yeah.
The thing about straight braid is, yes, it works most of the time. There are times when the fish start to reject it, or if they've seen it before, I don't know what. There's a few fish that will reject it. And there are times, so do you put a fluoro leader on? Like I use a 25-pound fluoro leader, and I usually don't have any problem with it, break-in, any issues, FG knot. But when do I use that? I feel like if I'm around structure and I need to pull these fish out, there are people who argue, well, I'm going to throw 50-pound braid. And you can. That works for you. That's great.
Yeah.
I throw a fluoro leader 25, maybe 30, and I'm thinking of it as like snook fishing in Florida.
Okay.
In Florida, when they're in the mangroves, those mangroves have the barnacles on them. Our poles in the water, our oyster bars, our docks have barnacles on them. If you're trying to pull redfish out of docks and you throw braid, a pair of scissors cuts most braid really easy, and it will cut it very, very, very easy. But good fluoro is tougher to cut than. So that's a situation where, am I doing it for the sight? Am I doing it for the cut resistance of the fluoro?
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things you look at. Some people say the Andy Mono is really great as a leader, and it's very abrasion resistant. Sure, that too. The reason is the same, is there may be times when you want one versus the other. So it's kind of a hot topic, but I find that, you know what, I've got all three. There are times when I might put on an anti-mono leader, and there's times I put on a fluoro, want it deeper. Fluoro sinks, mono sinks slow. Mm-hmm. And your sink rate has a lot to do with what I'm going to use.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as it relates to trout, when do you use straight fluoro versus braid with a leader versus braid with a fluoro leader versus braid with a mono leader? Mm-hmm. So mono leader, top water. That is the best use for that.
Yeah.
If I'm going to throw a top water for trout all day, it's a mono leader. It floats easier, not that floats, but it doesn't sink very fast.
Yeah.
Your fluoros will, a lot of people don't realize it, but there's many ways to work a top water. And if you're going to throw a top water out and you're going to do the let it sit for a minute, click it once, let it sit for 5 seconds or so, because that's a very effective technique, other than just walk. When I'm searching for them, I'm walk.
Yeah.
You know, once I find them, okay, where are the big ones and what do the big ones want?
Yeah.
But you put that piece of fluoro leader on there, and that fluoro leader will pull that nose down, and as that nose is starting to sink and you go to walk it again, you may have to pull it 4 or 5 times to get it to start walking right. Well, why isn't it walking right? Well, I chose the wrong leader. Mm-hmm. So having all these things in your arsenal, having some pieces of mono with you as a leader, these are small decisions that make a big difference at the end of the day.
Yeah. Something we kind of touched on before we started recording was spots, people getting locked in on the spots.
Yeah, that's a big subject. That so in the beginning of my kayaking, I'll say adventure, because that's really what it is. And anybody who wants to get into kayaking, there's so many different things that kayaking represents, that it's about. Going out and watching the wildlife, being 2 feet away from a dolphin, being really close to beautiful birds, sight fishing a redfish and just being a few feet away from it. These are things that keep me up at night. I can't wait to get back for all that adventure. But yeah, as I started in the whole kayaking thing, I was thinking, well, in that 2011 when I was trying to figure it all out, I said, well, when I bass fish, the first thing I want to establish is a pattern. Mm-hmm. What is the pattern? Where are they at during this bite window, this time of the day? And what I did with bass fishing is fish fast, furious, and until they gave me a clue. Well, and then I would just repeat that. Okay, I found one on a point. Okay, let's go to another point. Okay, I caught this one 100 feet off the bank. Okay, let's do that again. This one was near not a big group of birds, but I saw a single bird on the bank, and he was watching, but there was, what it was is 5 redfish cruising down, and there was some shrimp popping up, and that bird was watching those big redfish. Things like that, those clues, is what I was looking for in the beginnings with patterns. And what I started realizing was a lot of guys who were winning, and they were consistently winning, were going to the same couple of spots. And I started realizing the difference between freshwater and saltwater fishing. And one of the main differences is I feel like in saltwater fishing, you have fish, especially trout, and trout is one of our big targets. Yeah. Redfish, we kind of feel like we know. I can touch on that. But when it comes to trout, we feel like, okay, there's an oyster point over here, and the point comes out, and I always catch them on that spot, so I'm going over there. And what I was doing in 2011 was saying, no, we got a south wind. That's going to be wavy right there. I'm not going. Or we have a super high pressure. All that stuff up there shallow. I'm not going to fish it. I'm going deep. I'm going to find that deep bayou and fish drop-offs, because we have high pressure, and when we have high pressure, they're either going to be suspended or they're going to be very deep, where they're not as affected by the pressure. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of trying to buck the trend of spots, mm-hmm. And I was saying, I've got this figured out. I'm fishing patterns. They're all fishing spots. And then I realized as years went on, they were more consistent than I was, I felt like, with winning on those spots. And what I came to realize is a combination in my mind now is a combination between you have to put the weather correct with the spot. So you have spots that'll produce fish for several years.
Yeah.
But there's a window on that. We have a lot of spots that legacy spots that used to produce a lot of fish that don't anymore.
Yeah.
Why is that? My favorite spot's dried up or whatever. You have to move around. You have to constantly find a new area, and it does seem to be repeatable for several years. When you find a good area, it may be very, very repeatable.
Yeah.
But just match up the weather, the conditions with the spot. Now, that's a good spot. I love it. I want to go back to that spot. If you fall in love with a spot, you are not going to be the best tournament angler. You might be an occasional tournament winner,
Mm-hmm.
but not that consistent of a tournament angler. If you're going to be a tournament angler that's consistent, that wins a lot, you need to know when to go and not fall in love with a spot, but look at the practical conditions and make a decision that is unbiased.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you hate a spot and you know other people have caught on the spot, you cannot discount a spot just because you had no luck there once or twice.
Yeah.
And hate it, therefore you never go, or you went to it once and you've eliminated it. That's a mistake.
Yeah.
So loving or hating a spot and having that emotional connection to a spot can really hurt you.
Yeah.
And so knowing when to go is about putting it all together. When the conditions are right, then we're going to go. Then we're going to have success. And we're going to repeat it.
Yeah. So you've been fishing tournaments for many years at this point, and I think one thing that's kind of changed a lot in the past several years is CPR. I think there's several reasons for that, but maybe not a reason for it, but a reason that I'm glad we do it is conservation. I'm a big fan of catch and release. I really love the mantra that Chris Bush from Speckled Truth uses, keep what you need and release the rest. That's, to me, that says it all, And so that's why I love CPR. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so in 2011 was such a pivotal year, and also 2014, I'll have two things to say on that. In 2011, when I won the minimalist event, I had a full stringer, and I was blasted on social media platforms for keeping all those fish. What are you doing? I was just following the rules. I'm just going out fishing. I didn't realize I would get this kind of backlash for holding up a string of fish. And, at the time, I felt the same way, that we have to figure this out and do something different. It wasn't an intentional thing. It was just me following the rules of the event. But I knew there had to be a better way.
Yeah.
So when I started doing IFA, another draw to IFA to me was CPR. It was the first time I had heard of it. So I was participating in CPR in 2012, and that was the year I went to Rockport and won that event. And I said, man, this is just the best. Oh, I'm coming to Texas. A lot of people here in Texas blasted me for catching the fish in Louisiana. We had a 25 fish limit. So I get there, we catch them, we released it, and I said, man, nobody's going to blast me because we released them all CPR.
Yeah.
So I was kind of relieved about that whole situation. Well, as time was going on, and we went to Hobie Worlds in 2014, we're in Europe, I knew ahead of time that that was probably going to be the format, but I wasn't sure how it was going to work out.
Yeah.
And when we got there, it was a super clear water lake, beautiful, beautiful lake. You could see 20 foot down. And we're catching these pike, caught a few in practice. And I was hoping, man, hope none of these fish die, hope we can take care of them and the whole thing. So we would do I would wet my hands before I handled the fish, all these kind of practices that stream trout anglers do when they're fly fishing.
Right.
Try to protect the fish, keep them, Well, so we did that, and again, CPR, I said, this is catching on worldwide. This is not just a local thing. This is worldwide. Everybody's doing this. And then as time went on, I joined Bayou Coast as an officer, the officers team, and we decided to start scaling back at that time. So I was pushing to bring it from 5 redfish to 3, 25 trout to 15, and we got that done. And it was stair steps.
Yeah.
And that's what we were doing. We were bringing this down, and we had a few times where we had a few events. In fact, we had our first bass tournament way back. I want to say it was 15. We had our bass event that was a CPR.
Mm-hmm.
And we released all those bass, and that was a good event to work the bugs out, see how this was going to work as a regular event. And when COVID came around, it was the perfect thing. We were set up for it. We had been practicing a little bit, and we were able to do all of our tournaments CPR, and that really saved our seasons there for a couple of years. We did. And now, going forward, we work in most of the tournaments. It is discussed, and about half of them get CPR'd. But the catch rates are way down as well. So we don't catch and keep what we did. We keep the limits down to pretty much what we can eat.
Yeah.
And that is what I do. When I go fishing, I keep 5 or 6 trout,
Mm-hmm.
2 redfish.
Yeah.
That's all my wife and I need, so we're good with that. But I've had some good times over the years. A lot of good stories, crazy times kayaking, and I hope the viewers out there can get out there and experience some as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, you got a lot of knowledge and a lot of cool stories to share with people. Touch on one more thing, not really conservation related, but so you've been fishing Louisiana most of your life. A lot has changed as far as land laws. It's something you've noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you see? Do you see that changing? Maybe initiatives happening that people are going to start that can help kind of turn that around.
Yeah. So I actually did some work at the CPRA organization in Baton Rouge. I was working on some of their systems, and while I was in there, I would take the opportunity to try to talk to some of the engineers and people who are involved in the coastal restoration projects, and I would ask them point blank, so what do you hope to accomplish with this diversion? What do you hope to accomplish with this island restoration project or whatever? And I would ask them, and I would tell them some stories of us going out. The islands are gone. Things we fished just a few years ago are gone, and I got feedback from them. I think the focus has been on bringing the water in from the river to spread out to the marshes and raise the land and so forth. Well, I fished the Pointe Hatch area, Delacroix Pointe Hatch area in the 90s and early 2000s. And that was a magical place. I'm talking about bass, trout, redfish. 1 mile from the Pointe Hatch landing was just all day. We would catch, 3-man limit in a couple hours. The Oak River Troll was a big, big deal back then. So when winter came around, people would start in the Oak River and they would drift down it with jigs just right over the side, down the bottom, and load the boat.
Yeah.
The debate back then was it a gold hook or a black hook? That it didn't matter what bait you threw.
Yeah.
But that area, then they allowed the Mardi Gras cut to become the Mardi Gras Pass, which was open the Mississippi River up to that whole area. And the whole area is essentially more or less a mud flat now. Will it, is that what we needed? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I know what we had, and we were maintaining it with the Carnarvon diversion. And I felt like we were maintaining it some. It needed to be improved. More water from the Mississippi did probably need to go in on the southern end, rebuild some of the barrier islands.
Yeah.
But now it's just, it's all silted in. So is that going to happen to the Barataria Basin? And it becomes silted in and we don't see any benefits from it in our lifetime? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Venice was one place that they often cite. We'll look at Venice. We have the river dumping out. Venice is unique because you have the same thing down in the Atchafalaya. It dumps out into the Gulf.
Right.
But you don't have the fishing down there. And so that's been flowing out the Atchafalaya since the 1920s. The Mississippi down in Venice is unique. Can you duplicate that? I don't know. So I hope that a combination of restoring islands, planting mangroves to hold the soil, I hope controlled water diversions are put into place, but not too much like what happened in the Mardi Gras Pass.
Yeah.
So something in between seems like is what we ought to shoot for.
Yeah. Well, is there any other tidbits or information you want to share with the viewers?
Well, I have had a blast kayak fishing. It's been a big part of my life. It helped me, it helped me with my back issues. It helped, it helps with your just mental state going out from busy work to on the water. And here's the thing about kayaking. And we find this all over. I'll tell you one last story.
Okay.
So when I was in 2014, when I was at the Worlds, the then number one guy, Richard Somerton, I looked up to him. He was just awesome guy, awesome angler, real intense like the Australians are. Funny guys, but super intense. And when they're on the water, they're just all out. And the guy was like a professional diver, so his legs were like a linebacker. Mm-hmm. And here I am, little bitty guy, smallest guy in the crowd, pushing it all I've got to keep up with that guy and try to beat him to my spot. I found these pike, and I get in there, and I had these camera boats around me on the last day. Here it is, him and I going at it, and he just goes on past. No camera boats on him. He fishes my whole stretch right in front of me. And I turn around, I have the boats. I'm in the lead, and a camera boat gets in front of me, right where I want to fish. And I finally, just said, this is not working. So I pedaled away from all these guys, and I was power fishing for these big pike.
Mm-hmm.
And I was red fishing. I was throwing big baits, and I had been catching them, but it was overcast. And this last day, it was real sunny, bluebird sky, front had moved through. And I said, you know what? I've got to catch something. Let me go to the smallest little bitty bait. So I'll pull out this little bitty jig that I was using for the perch. 6-pound fluoro on my little tiny, like, brim rod. And there was a tree come down off this island. And so I'm just going to sit here, catch a brim or a perch, and then I'm gonna get that over with.
Yeah.
And then I'll go find another spot to pike fish because they ruined my whole spot. I'm mad. And this is where the emotional side, you have to regather, refocus. And I started jigging down in this tree, and I felt a hit. And it started moving, and I gently set the hook, and this thing is moving. It just kept moving. So that's not a perch. I've got a pike. So I took the rod, and instead of locking that rod in right here, like you normally do, you're going to fight your fish like that. I held the rod like this, then I held it like this, then I held it with 3 fingers. And I'm just like letting that fish walk around, and I just would do a half a turn on him. And I got him in, finally got him underneath the net. I pick him up, put him in the kayak. He opens his mouth, and the bait just
spit it out.
It wasn't even hooked. He was just holding it. I worked him so easy that he just didn't let go of it and got right in the net. Well, I went on to win the tournament. Well, 2 years later, here in Louisiana, we had Hobie Worlds in 2016. And after 2 grueling days of horrible weather, it was bad weather, 30-mile-an-hour winds, north wind, blew all the water out the marsh, muddy everywhere.
Typical tournament day around here.
Yeah. On the second day, I come in, and I had a little trout and a little redfish. And nobody had caught 2 fish that day. I was the only one to catch 2. So on the final day, Richard and I are first and second again. How does that happen? With 50 anglers from around the world, new anglers, bass fishermen. It was just, sometimes you just feel like you were led there. I caught these. You wouldn't believe some of the ways I caught these fish. I saw a bulkhead, and I threw a popping cork by this bulkhead. The trout hits, jumps out the water, flops over the bulkhead, and is hanging by the hook over the bulkhead. And I'm trying to get to him, but the water turned out to be super shallow between me and the bulkhead. So I'm pushing through the mud, pushing, trying to get over there to this fish, and I don't know how he didn't fall off. Well, on the final day, I knew that Richard was coming. His entire team, they were all ready. And there was an interesting article about Richard and I on Hobie's website. Clash of the Titans is what they called it. It was funny. But I just knew that Richard was going to beat me.
Yeah.
I knew he was going to catch a 40-inch red, and it was going to be over. Well, on that last day, probably the first cast, camera boats were all around, and I said, I'm not letting them get ahead of me. I made a rule: you have to stay behind me. You cannot get ahead of me.
Yeah.
And you have to be quiet. No dropping cameras and whatever in the boat. No noise. My first cast in horrific conditions, I caught a 19-inch trout. And at that moment, I said, you know what? I've got the rest of the day to catch one redfish. And for the next couple of hours, I worked and worked, and I just never. And it took about 4 hours, and finally I got a nice one. And I said, you know what? This is the best I can do. I went out to the main area in deep water, tried to catch a bull red, but I came back in, and in one detail I didn't say was in 2014 on the last day when I had my pike and my perch, and I really felt like I had it in the bag because of the lengths of the fish. I just felt like they would have to catch a world record perch and a pike to catch it. I mean, I just had such a lead only because of the format. If you catch two, that second fish really balloons up your length. So I caught two the first day, two the second day. On the third day, I caught two. I said, man, it's gonna be hard to beat. So I said, I've done all I can do. And I come into the landing in 2014, and the Australian director is there, and the American director is at the landing. They're getting it all prepped and all. And the American director, he says, what are you doing? Why aren't you still fishing? I said, I've got both. I don't need to fish anymore. He goes, okay, well, you sit right here, and you just let everyone, I want you to pull your kayak in the spot. As everybody's coming through, I want them to watch you. Just stay there all day. Well, then in 2016, and I felt like an idiot sitting there, I'm like, what am I doing? But I'm listening to what they're telling me to do.
Right.
And what he didn't want me to do was lose my camera. He didn't want me to break a rule, talk to somebody that I shouldn't. He didn't want me to do anything. He was looking out for me.
Yeah.
Well, in 2016, about 2 o'clock, I came in early. I pull into the landing, and wouldn't you know, the Australian director and the U.S. director are both at the landing. And when I pulled up, he says, why are you back? I said, I got both. the Australian director, he just looked up and goes, oh.
Here we go again.
And he just walked off, So, but that was a great time. But I don't feel like I was the best angler. I just felt like I was in the right spot.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody can do. They can take away from this that put yourself in the best spot for the conditions, use the principles, fish the whole water column, prepare with your tackle, have plan B, plan C, have diversity in your tackle. Don't underestimate casting ability. Work on your casting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do all those things, even somebody like me that I feel like I'm not the best angler, you will have success.
Man, it's some great information that I feel like everybody can benefit from. Steve, I gotta say, man, I know you keep saying you're not the best angler, but man, in my eyes and a lot of other people, you're the GOAT, man. It's seeing what all you've accomplished it's very impressive. It's inspiring. I aspire to maybe be half as good as you are someday.
Well, we can, we all have things we can bring to the table.
Right.
So if you are a really good red fisherman, use those skills, capitalize on those, and try to improve on the other skills. And, everybody you don't have to win a tournament to be successful. I've had a lot of tournaments where I've really stunk up the whole day, and at the end of the day made a really good comeback. Mm-hmm. and finished maybe in the top group, and I just felt like that was a win for that day.
Yeah.
So it's these moments that bring enjoyment to the sport of kayaking, any outdoor sports. But holding up the trophy is that can fade, but I'm telling you, those memories on the water, like I still remember that trout hanging on that bulkhead for dear life, barely hooked. And if I wouldn't have got him, I only won by 16 inches.
Whew.
So guess what that trout was?
That was a winning fish right
That was a
there.
winning fish.
Yep.
So things happen that, sometimes are luck, but put yourself in position to be lucky.
Mm-hmm. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I definitely learned a lot. So I'm going to have to go back through this and write some notes down with some good stuff.
I wish I could give you more stuff, but we run out of time. Maybe we can do another one day.
Yeah, for sure. We'll do another one
Yeah,
sometime.
we do techniques and actual on the water lure selection, things like that. How I think about lure selection.
Okay.
All that stuff is really, really important as well.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Well,
Thanks, Josh.
Yep, no problem. Well, everybody, I appreciate y'all tuning in. I hope y'all learned something. I know I sure did. Till next time, y'all take care and God bless.